In this episode of the Business of E-commerce, I talk with Luc Simmons about the 5 keys of a successful e-commerce business. This is the Business of E-commerce, episode 160. Welcome to the Business of E-commerce, the show that helps e-commerce retailers start, launch, and grow the e-commerce business. I'm your host, Charles Plesky, and I'm here today with Luc Simmons. Luc is the co-owner of Scope 16, an agency that works with e-commerce retailers to help them scale from 6 to 7 figures. I asked Luc on the show today to chat about what are the 5 key elements that are required for a successful e-commerce business. I like how he runs through this list, and they really are all things that you should be thinking about when you're first starting or just trying to scale your business. And he helps to really set some expectations for a lot of retailers, usually early on. They're kind of starting what they should really be looking at and know what they're getting into. I think anyone starting off, this is going to be super helpful. He goes through the 5 different topics. I'll link to those in the show notes, but let's get into it. So, hey, Luc, how you doing today?
I'm doing really well, Charles. How are you?
Good. Happy to have you on the show. I think this topic would be great for people kind of starting off. I see a lot of retailers kind of trying to get going, and they kind of get stuck right at that very beginning phase.
Absolutely. Especially, everything that's happened in the last, 12 to 18 months, it's definitely, everyone's noticed that, going online and e-commerce in particular has been something that, a lot of people wanted to jump on and take advantage of. And, I don't blame them whatsoever. So absolutely, I think it's definitely a question that relates to a lot of newbies, if you like, in terms of the e-commerce and really getting their brand up and running.
Yep. Yeah, we've seen, I know here at least we've seen a lot of brick and mortar retailers in the past 12 months say the brick and mortar is just, there's 0 people coming in. We're shut down. There's some government, the government lockdown sort of thing. We need to do something. We still have these distributor relationships. We still have all these products. We still have all this stuff. We just need to sell it somewhere. So a lot of them are jumping online just because of that. But it is different, right? Because let's say you're a brick and mortar. You're used to, putting out your sign, doing your local advertising, and you're competing against the people within a X number of mile radius. Versus
Absolutely.
You go online, now you're competing against everyone it's a niche. So it's like this virtual radius, and there's a mindset shift there.
Absolutely. Everything from the way that you position yourself as a brand to, even the community, because, like you said, brick and mortar, you understand the community that you're living in, you understand their needs and their wants. Going online and competing, but also then trying to understand how your audience can change from whether they're on the East Coast or the West Coast is completely different. So yeah, it's definitely not something that is just, a quick fix, and it's definitely not something that you can just kind of jump straight into. It takes time, but it's definitely the place to be, in my opinion, right now, for sure.
Yeah. So you have 5 reasons. I like numbers. I like lists with numbers, so we know what we're getting into.
Yeah.
So
definitely. Yeah. Let's do it. So, I've got the 5 things here. And like you said, this is definitely for, when you're first getting into it, understanding 5 of the most important things to take into consideration to allow yourself to start building a long-term e-commerce brand. So the 5 things I narrowed it down to are time, website conversion, using and leveraging organic side of things, so more on the social media side, data, and money as well. So
organic, what was number 4? Taking some notes here.
Number 4 was data, and number 5 was money.
Data and money. All right. So let's go into each one here. Data. All right. So number 1 is time. When you say time, what are we talking about specifically there?
Time is, I think it's just an expectation thing. Like I just touched on a minute ago, people think, running an e-commerce store is something that can just be done, and it can be done very, very quickly. But I think once you start diving into the world of e-commerce, you understand it's not as simple as just having a product and having a website. For sure, there's been cases and, people have got lucky. They've struck gold on the first go, and don't get me wrong, they've made a huge success of it. But on the whole, it's understanding that, Rome wasn't built in a day, as I like to say.
Yeah, I think I talked to a lot of new retailers, and they're saying, hey, I have this launch on whatever, like February 20th. And you start saying, unless you've done this before, unless you have your marketing and you're locked down, figured out, really dialed in, it's very hard to just say, oh, on the 20th, we're going to open the door and there'll be that line coming in. It's not
Yeah.
like, it's not like you're like at the beach and have an ice cream shop and like hey, we're selling ice cream. People just like show up. You need to really get people there. So
Absolutely, and there's so many, in that particular example, there's so many things to consider. Like you said, inventory, the build up. Are you going to be spending on paid ads leading up to that point, or are you going to be spending ads on that day? Because again, paid ads don't just happen overnight. You need to find the right time to start and prepare for it. There's other things to get in place as well. And I think unless you've done that a few times, you could be the most prepared person in the entire world. There's always going to be things that come up. That's life. That's just business at the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, I've talked to some folks here that they run their paid ahead of time, right? And they start generating an email list and they're really, and then they look and, I have X number of thousands of people on this list and they know, okay, and they've done it over 3 months. So that this list is warm. They've been communicating with them. Day one, they open up and they keep kind of, hey, it's going to happen in a week. It's going to happen in 5 days. It's going to happen tomorrow. And then it happens. And then the floodgates open up. But just to say, I'm going to start running a Facebook ad, it's a little unrealistic that day.
Absolutely. And I also think, there's always two ways to look at it. It's looking at it from an internal point of view and thinking about your brand. But, with especially like these last 18 months have been the perfect example. The external factors going on in the world, whether it's to do with the pandemic, whether it's to do, with the change in presidency, they all play a part in how well your launch will perform. And that's something that you have to consider. It's not just, it suits us and it suits our brand to do this. Yes, sure. But what's happening at that particular point in time that could potentially, lead to overperforming or underperforming, when you reach that launch date?
Yeah. What would kind of the mental model there be on, you're a new retailer and you're like, hey, we're going to launch the end of February. How would you kind of get yourself ready for that and understand, know, like, what should my expectations be? Should we be looking at a, 2 week, 2 day, 2 year horizon? Like, how would you even tell someone about that?
It's a great question. And obviously, it's definitely case by case, but just to give you, I would say, a general structure, the way that I would always start to think about these things is, break it down to the basics. So of course, if you're leading up to a launch, the most important thing is, do you have the inventory and do you have the ability to, deal with the amount of orders that you're expecting as well. And then taking a step back from there, it's also making sure that you have the things in place like paid advertising, or at least traffic, you could narrow it down to, that is going to be somewhat in the same level or the same threshold to allow you to sell enough of the inventory. So the way that I would look at it, to answer your question in a simpler way, is first of all, understanding the inventory that you need to have. And secondly, understanding from your audience's point of view and your ideal customer persona, what is it that they're looking for? And then beyond that, it's just being aware of those external factors. Like I said, once you've learnt the basics, you can almost over prepare. As long as you have the inventory and you understand that this is something that's highly in demand, then yes, I would definitely recommend going for one of those hard date launches. If that isn't the case, to be completely honest with Charles, and it's something that you're still in the early stages of learning and wanting to understand what the demand is for, I wouldn't have such a hard launch date. It'd be something that I'd gradually build in, and I wouldn't have such an emphasis on it. It's definitely something that I think having a hard launch date like that is something that should be built into a long-term plan for your e-commerce brand. You really have to understand who you are as a business and the customers that you're selling to.
And who you are as an entrepreneur, right? Like, I think some people having that hard launch date, that does something internally for them and they feel good and they're going to push and everyone pushes. But other people, like I know myself, I dislike hard dates. Like, I want to know if we get the night before and I'm like, you know what? I'm not ready. I want to be able to push it back. Or it's nice having, you do launch that day and it's a continuous soft launch. And maybe you don't open up to, 1,000 orders, but you might open up and get a couple orders and then realize, ooh, that like email sequence doesn't really make any sense, right? Now that I see it, let's dial that back. So instead of just like pushing 1,000 people through that day one and realizing, oh, then it doesn't make any sense. It's a lot easier to correct.
Exactly. And it's even things I do on a daily basis, you can end up rushing things, and that's when you miss the little details. And like you said, it can be simple things like the after buyer experience. Have you got that in place? Yes, you could have a great short-term gain, but have you got the back end sorted? Because once you've got people coming into your store and they're buying, products and all sorts from you, is that an experience that they enjoyed, and are they going to be coming back in the future? And that's the other thing. It's not just about what's happening in the present. It's you need to be thinking, a few months ahead and how they're going to be affected.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of things, and you learn, right? Like your analytics, you'll realize, oh, my Google Analytics wasn't set up right. I need to kind of go back and add these. Like, there's always this other thing that you forgot, and not
Exactly.
having that like pressure behind you does help. So,
Exactly. I think it's about setting just realistic expectations
yep.
at the end of the day. Yeah.
When you said so, number 2 was conversion. What was that about?
Yeah, so website conversion. Us as an agency, we are specialists when it comes to paid ads for ecom. But at the end of the day, like any service-based business, you have to understand that there's other factors that will play a part in the service that you're providing. And one of the biggest things for us is, knowing that when we're sending the traffic to an end destination, whether that's a website, whether that's a landing page or a funnel, we have to know that that is going to be to a standard where it should be converting, right? And I think, especially when we're again talking about the early stages of an e-commerce brand, it's something that can often be overlooked, in my personal opinion. And the worst thing that I've seen happen is, in those early stages, the emphasis is put too much on paid ads. And you start wasting thousands and thousands of dollars sending traffic to a website that just isn't converting at the rate it should be. And that, that's another thing that I'll touch on throughout the course of this conversation. But it's all about, at the beginning, understanding the assets that you really need to get off the ground before you start spending money on driving traffic to those assets. Because if you don't have those in place, you're throwing money literally down the drain.
How would you get that baseline? Because, right, you don't know day one. You send to this page and don't even realize it should be converting at a 0.5 or a 5% conversion rate. Like, and it changes business to business. So you have no idea. And like, then you send paid traffic and you're like, oh, it's converting at a 1%. Is that good? Is that bad? Like, you don't even know. So how do you get that baseline data?
Great question. And it ties back to the time, but you're right. You don't know initially. And there always needs to be obviously a form of traffic going to your website. And this is, touching on to the third one. And this is why they all really come together and tightly bond, is the fact that there is so much available to us these days when it comes to organic methods, across, Facebook, Instagram, just to name the big ones. But obviously then you've got things like TikTok, which in this day and age is becoming almost one of the best platforms to really go viral on. And, a lot of e-commerce brands that we deal with personally have leveraged that, and it's really allowed their business to reach record months time and time again. And to go back to your question about the baseline, the assets that really are important to get yourself off the ground is, one, having a website, and not necessarily, knowing the indefinite conversion rate that it's going to have, but making sure that you have, even if it's family and friends, and keeping it basic and just testing the user experience. So, I land on your website, I look at the homepage, I get to the categories, I then get to a product page, I add a product to cart, and I start to initiate checkout and make the purchase. How easy was that? Did I get caught on anything? Was there anything that, took me to a destination that I wasn't expecting? And it's simple mistakes like that can end up costing you a lot of money if you haven't got those basic checks in place at the beginning. So the first thing I would say is making sure you've got a website that's at least been checked and the user buyer experience is acceptable. And something like Shopify, on the whole, will allow that to happen. So that's definitely the first asset. The second asset, and one of the most important, is data. Again, data can be in so many forms. It can be through the Facebook pixel, through Google Analytics. It can be through an email list. And when you're first starting out, that's not necessarily something you're going to have. So again, this is where it all comes back to the organic side of things, is that I'm not opposed to paid ads. At the end of the day, that's what we live and breathe at the agency at Scope 16. But at the same time, being realistic about it, you have to start to understand your audience and who you're really targeting, in my opinion, from an organic point of view, before even thinking and considering about using paid advertising to your advantage.
Do you see people get stuck in this kind of chicken and egg sort of thing where they want to start testing, but they don't, they need to run paid ads, but and they don't know which one to do first? And should you wait for organic? Because that can take however much time to kick in. So what do you kind of recommend people do to get out of this chicken and egg?
Absolutely, yeah. It's definitely something that, and that's the thing. It might have sounded like, I'm almost saying don't touch paid ads until you get to a certain point, but the truth is that's not the case. You should definitely do a bit of everything, but the main point here is that when I'm talking about the assets that you need to have before you even consider paid advertising, is the website. That is your biggest asset as an e-commerce brand. People, that's where people at the end of the day need to go in order to buy your products. That's where you're making all of your money. And, that's the biggest thing that you need to have initially. Then the first thing in the first few weeks, I'm talking about, even in the first month, it's about just understanding, by putting content out there and by reaching out to family and friends and just getting some very, very preliminary and initial feedback on your product, the sort of feedback you are getting. Now, if the feedback's positive and you start to see that actually there is a demand for it, even with, like I said, even if it's within your close network, that's when I would highly start recommending that you do start putting a little bit of money into paid advertising. But what we do often see happening, Charles, is, people are working from home. They set up an e-commerce site. No one, not even their family members know that, this is something they've built out. And then before you know it, they start running paid ads. And that's the thing. Just use, it's like good old business. It's not what you know. It's almost who you know, right? And it's kind of using that to leverage the initial early days into a point where you can at least test your product with a few people before you start wasting money in paid ads.
Yeah, I've always liked starting with paid ads, but not for actual. You heard people talk about ROAS and you kind of tracking that. But at the beginning, you're not actually looking for any sort of return on ad spend. You're just looking to either, like you said, email family and friends and give me some data because I like you and we know each other, or just basically buy traffic to get that same data, right? So I don't know, maybe you have no friends and you don't want to hound anyone. You can just pay X number of dollars, get the traffic, and you're not looking for any return on ads, but you're really not looking for any of that. You're just looking for, I'm buying data right now. I'm just buying I'm basically buying my conversion numbers. I need to learn this number, and here's how I get it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like you said, it's having that expectation again. A lot of people think you put you put money into paid ads, it instantly means you're getting a ROAS.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's that expectation. If you're willing to put it into paid ads at the beginning, just understand that you're playing the long-term game at that initial point. Once you start to get the feedback and you can make the relevant tweaks, whether it's to your product, whether it's to the creative side of things when it comes to how you're displaying your product, or even certain parts to the user experience, then you can really start to expect to see a return on ad spend. But you're absolutely right. Within those first 30 to 90 days is the crucial time period, in my personal opinion, to use all these organic methods to really give yourself as much of a advantage before you start running paid ads. But on the other hand, if you want that head start and you have the money to put into it, of course do it, but don't expect to see the return on ad spend.
It just allows you to move faster. That's at the end of the day, right? Like, you're going to get
Exactly.
there. If you build organic traffic, you can build a Facebook following, you will get the data. But if you just want the data today, I can pay for 1,000 people to come to my site and just see what they do. And
Absolutely.
to get 1,000 people through organic, you will get there. It will take time. And using ads just is like a shortcut to this method.
Absolutely. And paid ads is something that in any e-commerce form is a must.
Yeah.
It's just knowing when to use it and how to use it. Like you said at the beginning, the objective is different. It's sending people to your website so that you can learn, test, and then obviously input it into your website.
Yep.
And then obviously as you start to get into it is to build that consistency when it comes to the return that you're making on the budget that you're investing.
Yep. When we said organic, you started touching upon that, and I was expecting you to go through to the SEO route, but you kind of went with Facebook and some other social organic. Social organic, let's call it that. Why would you not? Do you not classify SEO in that bucket anymore, or because 2021 SEO is a whole different game? Where do you kind of see that going?
Agreed. Good question. It's actually something I've never really thought about it like that. SEO is obviously it's something that it's definitely, in my opinion, when it comes to any form of organic or any form of marketing, it's obviously that real long-term game. And again, it's something that's vital to have, but it's definitely something that a lot of people don't think about until their e-commerce brand becomes somewhat established. So I would consider organic, but if you like it, I would consider it the slow organic method. The organic methods I'm thinking of have the potential to go quick. Don't get me wrong, they definitely don't go as quick as paid ads, as we just touched on, but they have the potential to go a lot quicker and start sending traffic to your website a lot quicker as well. And it gives you that balance between it not taking forever if you know what you're doing, but at the same time, it's still a free resource. It's still something that you can leverage without having to make the investment.
So you're saying get out there, start an Instagram, start posting, and just do the work to basically build the following on Instagram or TikTok or wherever.
Exactly. It's something that is quite often neglected, because, like you said, that's the thing. It's finding the balance. A lot of people will go too heavy paid ads. Some people will go way too heavy organic, and it's finding the balance. Social media should be something that is done, as an omni-channel. You need to be everywhere, and that's why by building them up from day one, even if you are going to be using paid ads, you have then platforms that you're able to send people to and keep people connected with your brand. If you don't have a Facebook page set up, if you don't have an Instagram profile set up, even TikTok, whatever it may be that you use, if you're not using that from day one, you're potentially missing out on keeping in touch with those initial customers that come your way.
Do you feel like it's very industry dependent on which platform to go with? Because I know some people, you hear like TikTok is like the thing, and other people are like, I don't, I sell printers to dentists. TikTok just isn't moving the needle for me.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was actually going to touch on. So absolutely right. It completely depends, on the sub niche or the category of products that you're selling. And one of the big ones that I think, again, is definitely in 2020 and also the beginning of 2021, we've noticed is really playing well. Again, not for everyone, but for specific products, and that is Facebook groups. There are certain products out there which allow you to build a community off of. Of course, if it's going to be, for example, a clothing store, a Facebook group is unlikely to be something that the users or the buyers would benefit from. On the other hand, though, if you've got a product, for example, that's selling something along the lines of candle supplies, let's say, just thinking of previous clients, but let's say candle supplies, that's something where obviously people are buying products and then at home are actually creating something. And that allows you to then start to build a community of people who are doing the same thing, have the same interests. And, rather than just having a following on Instagram, a Facebook group is going to be something that is much more unique, and it's something that you're then able to build up over time. And it's about finding, like I said, for your own particular brand, which of these platforms are going to work best. Again, if you have one particular product that works incredibly well and is almost, I like to put it into a category of an everyday product, but something that stands out from the crowd. So you have an everyday product, like for example a water bottle, but it's something that offers something slightly unique. It allows you to create videos, which something TikTok is great for, is kind of comparison videos, right? This water bottle can do this compared to a standard water bottle that can't. And that's talking in very basic terms, but TikTok works in such a good way when it comes to those types of videos and creatives. And the other thing I wanted to touch on with organic is social proof is by far the best type of content that you can use, both organically, but also most importantly in paid ads as well. And there's no better way of getting that other than actually starting to build these organic channels from day one.
Yeah, and the nice part, like you said, compared to just SEO, it can grow a lot faster. If you kind of find that that hook. I've seen people, we had a user here a while back, and they emailed us, just friendly little notice, hey, we're launching, they work with a lot of influencers, we're launching so-and-so on Thursday. And we're thinking, and I don't know who that person is, but okay, cool. And they turned it on, and it was like a floodgate open. I'm like, oh, I should probably know who this person is, like this influencer. And it was someone on TikTok. I still don't know what they even do, but it's impressive. You see some of these numbers, and like the orders just flooding in were really, it was something. So if you're on there and you have the following, you just, start selling Luke's candles, and all of a sudden you get your candle store going, and it's great. So
It's
Yeah.
great. And I think honestly, and it's trends, of course, but
Yep.
there are, Instagram used to do the same thing, but in this point in time right now, there's honestly nothing like TikTok in terms of how quickly you can go viral, in my personal opinion. There's accounts after accounts that are doing very simple, basic things, but people love it. People love it, and
Yep.
it's going crazy. And like you said, the numbers are mind-boggling just how quickly they can grow. And if that's something that you're able to build up, even if you're getting in the tens of thousands of followers and likes, that's sending traffic to your website. And guess what, you're building content in the background. It's not costing you anything to do it, and that's also going to help you when you come to paid ads. And you're building this whole ecosystem of different networks and social media profiles that's going to allow you to really build that strong foundation for your e-commerce brand.
Yep. I like it.
Yeah.
So data. Let's get into that. I like the data section. What do you do with
Yeah.
all this data, right? Because I feel like there's two sides: people that don't look at it, and then people that go like data crazy. And you install something like what's a good one on like Google Analytics, some of these different things like time on page, and you get some of these data points. And you're like, what do I even do? Time on page? Do I want that number to go up? Or do I want it to go down? Like, what do I even do with these numbers? So like, how do you even
Absolutely.
use data to actually make decisions?
That's a really good question. You're absolutely right. There's two things I wanted to talk about with data. Is obviously what data should you have as an e-commerce brand, and what should you be looking to acquire, and at the same time, how do you interpret that data, like you said, Charles? So I think when it comes to interpreting data, if we go with that first, it's especially, let's look at paid ads. If we're looking at Facebook and Instagram, because that's majority of where people start when it comes with paid ads, it makes sense. Largest audiences on there. It's going to tell you a lot about your brand and your users' experience. Again, that's in relation to the Facebook pixel. So where are people getting held up when they land on your website? Are they staying on the homepage and then clicking off your website? Or hang on a second, are they actually staying on your homepage, reading everything, and then making their way through to the potential hot buyer areas? So looking at products, adding to cart, initiate checkout. When you start to see the rhythm, if you like, of people actually landing on your website, and you're starting to see the ratio from view content to add to cart to initiate checkout, and you can see this smooth progress, of course it's going to decline. You're onto something good. But it's also going to, on the same time, on the reverse side of things, allow you to see potentially where you've got these holdups, where you've got these bottlenecks that are preventing you from increasing the conversion rate for one, but also improving the buyer experience at the same time.
Yeah, and I think what I've always done with data is just from day one, just start collecting as much as you can, but don't focus on just almost nothing at the beginning. Just collect data. And then at some point when you're ready to start optimizing, just find like that 1 or 2 data points that you're just trying to optimize, going from this page to that page, going from, the product page to a checkout page. Like that's the only thing you care about at that point. Optimize that and then move on. And I think a lot of people get hung up on, they're just looking at all these like numbers, and you get overwhelmed very quickly.
Absolutely. And like you said, data is not something you can control. You just have to, the most important thing is to make sure that you have a way to collect it. If you have the infrastructure in place to collect the data, you're in a good point. But you're going to drive yourself crazy if you think you can control the amount of data and the type of data you're getting through, and whether that's good or bad data. And that's another thing, whether the data you're collecting is good or bad. And there's definitely ways that you can ensure it to a certain extent that it is good data you're getting. And there are ways as well that you need to be careful, because, there are certain ways that you can use paid ads that unfortunately will drive bad data to your website. And unfortunately, the pixel collects that, and that can lead to problems down the line. But you're right. There are the biggest thing when it comes to data and interpreting it, in my personal opinion, is, like you said, don't get distracted by the bells and whistles telling you someone's been on this page and they were looking at this page for 5 seconds. It's okay, to a certain extent, it's going to tell you a little bit, but it's not going to give you the overall picture. And then, from that point of view, I would really focus on the main stages in the buyer's process, and always relate it back to that buyer's process. So they land on your website, they go to the product page, they potentially add it to cart, they go to checkout and start initiating checkout, and obviously, hopefully, they complete the purchase. And that's what you should really be focusing on a day-to-day basis. Everything else, of course, can be looked into more detail, but as long as you're looking and tracking that data, that's going to give you everything you need to start building a converting website.
Yeah, I like that. One tip I found too, when you're starting off, start with Google Tag Manager,
Yep.
GTM from day one. I see a lot of people don't do that, and you install, they're like, it's just Google Analytics, and then all right, we'll do the Facebook pixel, and like, all right, we'll do this other pixel, and then by whatever point a year from now, you're like, oh, we have like 30 pixels on the site, and you're trying to like change one and what goes where, and then worst case, you bring someone in marketing, and then for every pixel change, they need to email like someone with different access, and it breaks something like if you just install Tag Manager from day one, it just gives you this really nice place, and it's a little confusing at first. But if you've never used it, but then you give it to the marketing person later, they're like, "Oh, thank you for." They're universally excited about that. So that's one of those things. Just start it from day one, because a lot of stuff is difficult to set up and requires tweaking over time.
Absolutely, I 100% agree with that. And funny enough, talking more about as an agency, that's one of our qualification processes. Yeah. We need to know that you have the data, and from an e-commerce owner's point of view, that's just letting you know how important data is. If we don't have that data to use, there's no way that we can even think or guarantee any sort of results, because the data is going to tell us everything that we need to know.
There's no baseline, right? So you can't say we increased X% because you don't know where you're starting from. So there's nothing to work with.
Exactly. And I think, a lot of people will agree in marketing, no matter your personal preference about a product or however anything looks, you can look at a product and think it's the best product in the world. But if there's no data to back that up, more often than not, people are wrong from their initial preferences. When you start getting it out there to the big wide world and you start testing things, that's when you really start to see actually what works and what doesn't work. Having these presumptions before it gets out there can often, be the wrong thing.
When you mentioned bad data, what's an example of that? Like where it would actually cause more issues and harm than good?
Absolutely. So, the easiest way, or the most common way that we come across this is when we're running paid ads, specifically talking about Facebook and Instagram here again, it's just, thinking about the campaign objective. Obviously the most common one is conversions, but then, a lot of people will use or have used traffic in the past. And that's, that can be because of a lack of knowledge, or it can just be down to the fact that they want to, achieve results for the lowest cost possible. And the problem is with not understanding the difference in both of those objectives is that actually traffic can sometimes lead to driving the wrong people to the website, because Facebook is simply driving people to your website that are going to take a certain action. But unfortunately, the truth, 90% of the time is that they aren't actually going to be the particular audience that are going to be buying from you on a regular basis. So yes, you're going to get more data coming through, but the data you're getting is painting an unrealistic picture. And that's the thing, again, talking about data and looking at data, you shouldn't be so fixated all the time on, whether your numbers are huge or big. It's actually, how trustworthy is this data I'm looking at? Because you could have, 100,000 website visitors in a month, but if you're driving that traffic from, a source that makes no sense, and as an end result, they're not going to be purchasing from you, all that data is going to do is sway the data that actually matters. So in comparison to 1,000 legit customers that have a very high chance from buying from you, that's going to tell you a lot more than 100,000 unrelated buyers would.
Yeah, I think and I don't know if you can still do this on Facebook, just say campaign objective likes. Like I just want likes on my page. And you do stuff like that. And you underestimate there's just people out there that like doing that thing, like liking a page or just clicking on an ad. They don't buy. Like they definitely don't buy, but they love clicking on ads or love liking pages. And I've run some of those just as kind of a test and seen like, who are these people? And then you go to their page and you realize they like maybe 1,000 different pages. It's like they just like that's what they do with their day. So whatever objective you pick, Facebook will find people that will do that thing real well. And like you said, if it's clicking on something, they're good at finding people that like to click on things. But yeah, trying to get people to actually put something in a cart, those are much, much more difficult to find. And you're going to need a lot more data, a lot more time, a lot more money. So.
Exactly. And it's like you said, that's one objective. Also engagement, like you said, Facebook finds people that are going to put random comments on your ad, which is and that's another story, just how they do that. And, it's incredible that they can. But the problem is that, yes, it can be good for certain things. But again, you have to be aware that actually if you're using that as your main as your main method to driving traffic to your website, it can lead to problems down the line.
It's a tool, right? It's your toolbox, and you have a tool in there. When you run a new ad, starting off with an engagement campaign, just to make it right. No one wants to see the ad, and you're like, oh, there's 0 likes and no one commented on it. Cool. Like, you just kind of move on. But when you look and you're like, oh, there's 700 likes, there's 50 comments, or all these like positive things. Maybe there's something going on here. So using that engagement as a tool at the beginning to just generate engagement, but realize like I'm not going to get any sales. I'm just making my ad look, decorating my ad. Basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's just understanding that. And when is the point to use it, and when is the point to then switch to the right strategy, and as obviously aiming for conversions and collecting the right data. So yeah, absolutely on the same page.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, the first time you see those objectives and you're like, what? Like, it's like this like overwhelm. And I think that is a benefit of going with an agency as someone that says, okay, we're going to run an engagement campaign for the first 3 days, get a bunch of likes, then we're going to add, get some clicks through there just to kind of get people on the site to we can retarget them. Then we're going to our actual, the big campaign. We're going to really kind of double down on whatever your process is, but at least someone with a process, right?
Yeah. And, this is the other thing as well, over the last, especially, every year it's getting more and more competitive on these paid ads platforms. It's, even maybe 4 or 5 years ago, when I honestly was just starting out, you could pretty much throw money at Facebook and you would somewhat see some sort of return, but in this now, fast forward to now, it's honestly not the case. And I think that's a big misconception, is that it's as easy as just placing money on Facebook and you're going to see a return. It's just understanding it's not as simple as that, and it's for your own benefit as well. Doing it right from day one is going to allow you down the line to reach heights that you just wouldn't imagine.
Yep. So last but not least, money. What is that about?
Yeah.
I think people don't realize how money works in e-commerce when you go into it. You think it's a money printing machine, and you don't realize that when you're scaling up, it's a money like eating machine, oddly. So tell me about money.
It's absolutely. It's like a car, right? It's like an ongoing expense. Like you get a puncture, you have to change something on the car. It's constantly expense. And I think, like you said, Charles, it's like a lot of people when they first open an e-commerce store, it's like, oh, ROAS, I'm doubling my money. Yeah. It's just thinking about it even down to the inventory level. Yes, you're doubling your money, but now you've got customers that are demanding a product from you. You now need to have inventory that you're purchasing for and preparing for that inventory in advance. And that means, in essence, at least for the sort of first 6 months, you need to be prepared to be out of pocket a lot of the time because you're playing catch up. Yes, down the line, that's when you can see these amazing money printing machine examples. But definitely, money is something that at the beginning, it's not, again, there are examples out there where you can start with a very small budget and people have turned it into millions and millions of dollars back. But on the whole, there has to be a certain expectation that actually if you're pumping money in, you need to be doing it on the right reasons. And just going full circle with this, if I'm first starting out on those first 30 to 90 days as an e-commerce brand, the way I like to look at it, that first, $2,000 to $3,000 I have, if I had to put a price tag on it, they're going to be focused fully on getting my assets 100% or to the best of my ability ready for real serious traffic. And like I said, I'm talking about website, I'm talking about making sure I have the right content and I have the right social proof. They're the biggest assets, and also data, sorry. They're the 4 main assets that I would really want to make sure I had in place. Once I've got those assets and you have, you have then money to invest into paid ads, absolutely go ahead and do it. But also be prepared to not see a return straight away. And that's why you see people still working a 9 to 5 alongside, right? Because it's not something that you can quit your job 9 to 5 straight away in most cases, because you have to have that certain expectation that's going to take time to build up to a point where the profits you're making makes sense to take it full time.
Yeah, I see a lot of interesting stuff going on now about just investment in e-commerce from like a line of credit perspective, and a lot of folks are trying to do different things around this. And I think that's one of the next big things, right? Where you have folks and you can start a store easily, you can start collecting that data, you can start getting those baselines. But then when you actually say, okay, let's jump in the pool head first, then all of a sudden you look and you're like, oh, we need like a war chest to really do this. We need to really like, our ad spend could be thousands, tens of thousands per month, week, day at some point. And as that ramps up, you're gonna have to buy more inventory. And then you're gonna have to spend more on ads with more inventory. And there's just this ongoing like cash eating machine. So I think there's a lot of people out there, and I think there'll be services come up in the next few years on lines of credit or just ways of them looking at order flow data, analyzing and say, okay, we can give you a line of 40K or whatever that number is, to then be able to increase. And if that works, then go up from there. Because I think that's a wall. As soon as you have a little success, that's a wall a lot of people hit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's the thing, the first year in any business is always going to be one of the hardest. And it's just understanding that, it's not that, like you said, cash making machine. But at the same time, this isn't to put people off from, running and trialing, e-com stores. Like it's hand on heart, it's one of the best things that you can do at this current point in time. But it's just knowing that actually don't expect, within the first 3 months to have a fully fledged, established e-commerce brand that's going to be able to sustain you and your lifestyle. It's actually something that, has to be treated like a brand. It's something that has to be built up over time, has a journey, and you have to be prepared to go with it on that journey. And as long as you always remain on that core idea as to why you have this product and why you're selling it, you're going to be in for the long term. And I think that's the biggest thing is, you have to have a brand that you're passionate about. It's like anything, when you're growing up, it's like, make sure you try and find a job or a career that you enjoy, because then you'll never have to work a day in your life. And it's finding something like that you're passionate about, because I think as long as you're passionate about it, you're not there to just rush and make quick money. That's not the way that e-commerce works. But that being said, if you understand how it works and the time that it does take, the benefits are endless.
Yeah. I think that's a great place to end it. And I think most people, if you're getting into it, just get into it knowing this is going to take, I could be in this 5 to 10 years. So this needs to be something like I can picture myself waking up 8 years from now and like doing this. And the job is going to change, but you're going to be you're going to be solving this problem for years to come. So you just make sure it's something you can do that on. But
absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's super helpful. If people want to kind of see what you guys are working on, so tell me more about the agency and what do you guys do there?
Yeah, perfect. So we obviously work with e-commerce and also info product brands, predominantly e-commerce brands. We really specialize in helping brands that want to take it to that next level. So a lot of brands are coming to us, a lot more recently because of the pandemic and everything in those early stages. And we actually have a very good support team in place that actually allow them to basically free up their money while still getting the support they need, right? I think that's the most important thing, is that getting an agency isn't always going to be the most economically wise choice to do at the beginning. And that's why we actually have two main services. The main service is obviously a done for you program, and these are for the brands that have got past that sort of 90-day stage and are really starting to see sales come in. And a bit like we touched on earlier, Charles, is now they're starting to deal with serious inventory issues and making sure that all these different moving parts are aligning. That's when the right time is to come in for a done for you package. That being said, though, like I said, there's a huge demand for people wanting to start their own e-commerce brand. And the other side to our business is helping those people without, having these huge monthly retainers. It's actually giving the ability to have, world-class support and guidance from our coaches that have their own e-commerce stores as well, and being able to take that to the next level. And we give them full support from actually setting up their own initial campaigns, how to optimize them, how to scale them, and at the same time, just giving overall good business advice as well.
And what is that, like a monthly coaching program sort of thing?
It is. It's actually a 6 weeks intense training program, and then after that we have ongoing support. That's basically as part again of a Facebook group, and we have 4 to 5 weekly calls where, like I said, coaches jump on. We have special guest speakers that jump on, again talking about their own experience in their own e-commerce brands, and sometimes it can be about particular topics. Website conversion rate, for example. We have website specialists coming in and really one-to-one analyzing what's going on with someone's website, potentially how we can start improving that conversion rate.
Yeah, I always like the idea of having kind of groups, whether it's coaching or a mastermind or just some group you're in, some community where you're going to have these odd challenges. Like there was something the other day I was wiring money to whatever country, and I'm like, I don't know how to wire money from here to there. Like I've just never done that, and I'm in a couple of groups, and they're like closed groups, and you just kind of ping people in there, and you're like, hey, I'm trying to do this, and there's like multiple people that are like, oh yeah, I wire money there all the time. You're like, oh. Great. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. Here's what I use. Here's the service. How much I pay. I'm like, thank you. So like you
Amazing.
could go around for all the stuff, right? Like what when you start a new Facebook campaign, like what objective should I use? Like you can Google and watch videos, but it is nice having someone there that you can kind of just ping and be like, hey, here's what I'm working on. What do I do? And you just get an answer a lot faster. So
Absolutely. At the end of the day, any sort of, coaching, anything that's out there is on the internet. That's how everybody learn. A lot of people learn is through YouTube ads. It's one of the best resources that everyone has available. But, the coaching side of it is that, if you want the ability to know where you're potentially stepping off the track and you don't want to spend months and thousands of dollars figuring out those own mistakes yourself, we're the ones that are going to be able to put you and keep you on that track so that you can reach success as soon as possible. But you're absolutely right with, that community feeling. It's something that going online is definitely different to the brick and mortar that we spoke about right at the beginning. You couldn't imagine almost having a tight-knit community and having a Facebook group, with let's say, for example, supermarkets competing. You wouldn't imagine them being on the same group. Whereas even on a Facebook group like our coaching group, you have people that are trying to run their own e-commerce stores, but there's no direct competition. And I think that's the nicest thing about it is that there isn't any, love or hate relationship. Everyone is able to help each other. There's enough room for everyone to succeed as well. Is the big thing.
Love it. Okay. If people want to kind of find you, reach out, if they have more questions, where can they do that?
Yeah. So 2 places. We've got a Scope 16 marketing Instagram page and also Facebook page. But please feel free to reach out to me at Luc Simmons on Instagram as well, and we'll get you speaking to the team.
Awesome, Luke. Thanks a lot for coming on. Appreciate it.
No worries, Charles. Thank you very much.